24 hours. That's all that separated me from $3 million invested equity. I'd built Horizon Analytics from the ground up, survived 3 near bankruptcies, and now the acquisition papers sat on Reginald Fairchild's desk. Nash, we need to talk about your employment agreement. The conference room felt wrong that morning, October 14th. One day before closing, one day before my equity vested. Reginald sat across from me wearing a $15,000 suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. These stories don't just happen in boardrooms. They happen in the shadowy corners of corporate America where ambition meets greed, where handshakes mean nothing, and loyalty is just another line item to eliminate. Welcome to the corporate vault where we expose what really happens behind closed doors. These aren't fairy tales, they're survival stories. Reginald wasn't alone. Claudia Winters, our general counsel, sat to his right, refusing eye contact. Bad sign, a thin man in wire-rimmed glasses sat on his left, outside counsel. Worse sign. We've been reviewing the organizational structure post-acquisition, Reginald began, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. Titan Med has significant in-house technical leadership. Your role would be redundant. Redundant, 6 years of my life reduced to one word. We're offering a generous severance package, the outside counsel said. 6-month salary, benefits continuation, and accelerated vesting of 50% of your unvested equity. 50% of $3 million. They were stealing half and calling it generous. The acquisition closes tomorrow, I said quietly. My equity fully vests at closing provided I'm an active employee. Correct. However, your employment agreement allows termination at any time with or without cause. We're exercising that clause, effective end of business today. There it was, the trap I never saw coming. They were firing me 24 hours before closing, before my equity vested, eliminating their obligation to pay me what I'd earned. $3 million evaporating with a signature. My name is Nash Brennan. 6 years ago, I co-founded Horizon Analytics, revolutionizing how healthcare systems predicted patient outcomes. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My father ran a hardware store where he knew every customer by name. My mother taught 3rd grade for 33 years. They taught me that empathy isn't weakness, it's currency. That empathy became both my greatest strength and my blind spot. Reginald Fairchild came from old money, Connecticut boarding schools, and a Wharton MBA he mentioned constantly. Our Series B investors brought him in as CEO, insisting we needed adult supervision to scale. I should have seen the warning signs, how he called employees legacy liabilities and client relationships emotional entanglements preventing optimal pricing. But we needed the funding. So I signed the papers making him CEO and told myself different perspectives strengthen companies. That decision would haunt me. The first 2 years with Reginald were textbook cognitive dissonance. Revenue tripled. We expanded to 200 healthcare systems nationwide. The tech press called us the future of predictive analytics. But underneath, something rotted. Employees I'd recruited personally started leaving. Not for money, they left because the culture had changed. Thursday team lunches celebrating small wins disappeared, replaced by mandatory productivity optimization sessions. My open-door policy became a formal ticketing system requiring 3 approval levels for 15 minutes with leadership. I raised concerns in executive meetings. Reginald would nod, take notes, say all the right things about balancing growth with culture. Then nothing changed. Nash, you're too close to this, he told me. You see these people as family, I see them as resources. That's not cold, it's professional. The board backed him. He delivered the numbers they wanted. My concerns about culture sounded quaint next to his PowerPoint presentations with hockey stick projections. So I retreated into my domain, focusing on technology and product innovation. I told myself that protecting our technical integrity would make everything work out. That was my second mistake. The first was trusting Reginald. The second was underestimating him. The human brain does strange things under extreme stress. Some people rage, some cry, some shut down. I felt myself splitting into 2 versions, one who wanted to flip the table and scream, and one who was cold and analytical, already calculating possibilities. The analytical Nash one. I need to review these documents with my own attorney, I said, keeping my voice level. I won't sign anything today. Reginald's expression tightened. Nash, let's not make this difficult. The severance is extremely fair, well above market. You'll land on your feet. Fair. He used the word fair while stealing $3 million. I'll have my response by end of business tomorrow. Since you're terminating me effective today, I assume you'll want to discuss transition of my projects. Claudia looked up, surprised. Reginald had expected anger, threats, maybe tears, not calm professionalism. We've already assigned your projects. Your system access will be deactivated at 5 p.m. today. Standard security protocol. They'd thought of everything, or so they believed. Understood. I'll collect my personal items and be out by end of day. I walked out with my head up and my heart hammering, 24 hours to find a way out or accept that I'd been outmaneuvered. But something had crystallized during those terrible minutes. A memory, a conversation from years ago I'd almost forgotten. There might be a way out after all. My office had been stripped. Photos, whiteboards, even my lucky rubber duck, all packed in boxes like a funeral waiting to happen. I ignored the boxes. I had something more important to find. In my filing cabinet, buried under 3 years of performance reviews, was a manila envelope dated March 12, 2018, the day we'd restructured for Series B funding and made Reginald CEO. Inside was a document our attorney at the time, Elizabeth Hawthorne, had insisted I include. I dismissed it as legal boilerplate, one of a dozen protections lawyers add just in case. The document was titled Founder Equity Protection Provisions Addendum to Amended Bylaws. I started reading. Really reading? Section 4E paragraph 12, subsection C. In the event that any founder's equity vesting is interrupted by termination within 30 days of a change of control event, said founder shall retain certain protective rights, including but not limited to veto authority over the change of control transaction, restoration of full voting rights regardless of current equity position, the right to trigger a comprehensive third-party governance audit. I read it 3 times. Photographed every page, read it again. Elizabeth Hawthorne had built a nuclear option into our bylaws and nobody had noticed, or if they had, they'd assumed it would never be triggered. After all, what kind of CEO would be stupid enough to fire a founder the day before an acquisition closed? Reginald Fairchild, apparently. I left at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my access terminated. The security guard looked uncomfortable as I handed him my badge. Sorry to see you go, Nash. Place won't be the same. Thanks, William. Take care of yourself. Sitting in my 7-year-old Honda Civic in the dim parking garage, I let myself feel everything. The anger, the betrayal, the fear that maybe I was wrong, maybe I'd misread the bylaw, maybe I was about to make a fool of myself. But underneath was something harder and colder, determination. I'd spent 6 years building Horizon. Not just the technology, but the relationships, the reputation. I'd made sacrifices that couldn't be measured in stock options. And Reginald thought he could erase all that with a termination letter and a half-measure severance package. He was about to learn differently. I called Elizabeth Hawthorne. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years. She answered on the 3rd ring. Nash Brennan, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. You knew this would happen. I knew it was possible. Men like Reginald are predictable once you understand what drives them, power and credit. He couldn't stand that Horizon was your creation. The acquisition was just an excuse to cut you out. Bylaw 4E. The founder equity override rider. Is it enforceable? Pause. When Elizabeth spoke again, her voice changed, all business sharp and focused. Oh, it's enforceable. I made absolutely certain. The question is, are you ready to use it? Because once you invoke those provisions, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, deliberately chosen because it was nowhere near Horizon's offices. Elizabeth looked exactly as I remembered, steel gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, charcoal suit that probably cost more than my mortgage. She had the bylaws already printed, Bylaw 4E highlighted in yellow. Walk me through it in plain English. Elizabeth sipped her espresso. When we restructured for Series B, you gave up significant control. Reginald became CEO, new board members joined, your voting percentage diluted. You did this in good faith, but you didn't trust that. I trust contracts, not people, so I built in protections. If you're terminated within 30 days of a change of control event, you automatically regain extraordinary rights. These prevent exactly what Reginald's trying. Veto authority over the acquisition. That seems extreme. It is. The logic is simple. If the company fires you right before a major transaction, something's wrong with either the transaction or the governance. So the bylaws give you power to pause everything and force a full review. I felt a cold smile forming. Reginald doesn't know about this. I doubt it. He brought in his own legal team. They probably reviewed the bylaws at a high level, but this provision is buried in founder protection language that looks standard. Most attorneys skim right past it. What happens when I invoke it? You formally notify the board and the acquiring company. Once you do, the acquisition cannot proceed until either you withdraw your veto, the board restores your position and vesting rights, or a third-party governance review is completed. The third option takes months. 6 to 9 months, yes. Which means Titan Med would likely walk away. They won't wait while Horizon gets audited. They'll find another company and Reginald's big exit evaporates. The weight of it settled over me. This wasn't just about getting my money back. Using Bylaw 4E meant potentially destroying the acquisition entirely. $420 million gone, every employee with stock options, their payouts erased. I can see what you're thinking, Elizabeth said. You're worried about collateral damage. That's why you're good at what you do, Nash. A lot of people are counting on this acquisition. The engineering team worked so hard. They deserve their payout. They do, Elizabeth agreed, but Reginald chose this path. You didn't fire yourself. He made a calculated decision to steal $3 million because he thought you'd either accept it quietly or not realize you had recourse. He underestimated me, spectacularly. Now you have a choice. Sign his severance, take the half measure and walk away, or use the protection I built and make him face consequences. I thought about my parents, my father extending credit to struggling families. My mother spending her own money on school supplies for kids whose parents couldn't afford them. They'd taught me empathy, yes, but also that standing up for yourself isn't cruelty, it's dignity. There might be a third option. What if I don't want to destroy the acquisition? What if I just want what I'm owed? Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. You're thinking of using the veto as leverage. Reginald wants this acquisition, the board wants it, TitanMed wants it. I'm the only obstacle. So what if I make them a deal, restore my vesting rights, put me back on payroll for the next 24 hours and I'll withdraw the veto immediately? That could work, but be prepared for them to refuse. Reginald has an ego the size of Connecticut. Backing down to you, publicly admitting he was wrong, that might be more than he can stomach. Then the acquisition dies and everyone learns that actions have consequences. Elizabeth studied me. You've changed since we last worked together, you're harder. I learned from a good teacher. When can we file the formal veto notification? First thing tomorrow morning. Before the scheduled closing. We filed the paperwork at 8:47 a.m. on October 15th. The notification went simultaneously to 3 parties, the Horizon Board, TitanMed's acquisition team, and the SEC. The language was precise and devastating. My phone started ringing at 8:52 a.m. Claudia Winter's voicemail. It rang again 30 seconds later. Voicemail, then text messages flooded in. I ignored all of them. Elizabeth had been clear. Silence is power in negotiation. Let them panic. Let them feel what it's like to have something valuable ripped away. At 10:15 a.m., an emergency board meeting was called. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I knew exactly what was happening. Reginald was trying to find a way around Bylaw 4E. The lawyers were explaining there wasn't one. Board members were calculating how much money they'd lose if this acquisition fell apart. And in TitanMed's Minneapolis headquarters, executives were having serious conversations about whether they wanted to be involved with a company that clearly had governance problems. At 2:30 p.m., my phone rang. Andrew Holloway, the lead independent director on Horizon's board. Old School Venture Capital, one of our Series A investors, someone who'd been supportive even after Reginald took over. I answered, Nash, we need to resolve this today. I agree, I've been ready to resolve it since yesterday before I was illegally terminated. The termination wasn't illegal. Your employment agreement clearly allows. Andrew, we both know this isn't about legal technicalities. This is about Reginald trying to steal my vested equity and me having the temerity to defend myself. Long pause. What do you want? This was the moment Elizabeth and I had prepared for. The ask needed to be specific, reasonable, non-negotiable. 3 things. First, I'm immediately reinstated as an employee, retroactive to yesterday at 5 p.m. Second, I remain an employee through acquisition closing, which means my equity vests in full. Third, Reginald issues a written apology to me and the board for attempting to manipulate the vesting schedule. Nash, you know Reginald will never agree to the third point. A written apology, you're asking him to humiliate himself. Then I suppose the acquisition doesn't happen, which would be unfortunate for everyone, especially for Reginald, since the board will inevitably ask questions about why he thought firing a founder the day before closing was a good idea. Muffled voices in the background. Andrew had me on speaker. Give us 1 hour. You have 45 minutes. TitanMed's closing team is probably drafting their withdrawal letter as we speak. Every minute you waste is a minute closer to this deal falling apart. I hung up. My hands were shaking. This was the biggest bluff of my life. If the board called it, I would have accomplished nothing except burning every bridge I'd built. But I'd made the cost of fighting me higher than the cost of giving me what I wanted. Power isn't about having the biggest army. It's about being willing to destroy what the other side values most. 33 minutes later, my phone rang. We accept your terms, all 3 points. You'll receive the paperwork within the hour and will notify TitanMed that the obstacle has been resolved. Andrew sounded exhausted, and Reginald's apology, being drafted as we speak. Nash, you won. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. But I wasn't done, not quite. One more thing, Andrew, I want it noted in the board minutes that Bylaw 4E remains in effect in perpetuity for all founders of Horizon. What happened to me can never happen to anyone else. Long silence. Then, agreed, is there anything else? No, that's everything. I'll withdraw the veto as soon as I receive the signed paperwork. The documents arrived at 4:17 p.m. delivered by courier. Everything as promised. reinstatement letter backdated, confirmation of full equity vesting, and in a separate envelope Reginald's apology. It was a masterpiece of corporate passive voice. Regret any misunderstanding. In the best interest of all parties, grateful for Nash's contributions, every word chosen to give maximum compliance with minimum actual contrition, but it was signed. Reginald Fairchild's distinctive scrawl, a permanent record that he'd tried to cheat me and failed. I photographed everything, uploaded it to secure cloud storage, then sent Elizabeth the withdrawal of my veto. She filed it immediately. At 5:43 p.m., I received an email from TitanMed, pleased to confirm closing will proceed as scheduled. Transaction expected to complete by end of business today. At 7:22 p.m. it was done. Horizon Analytics was officially a TitanMed subsidiary. $420 million had changed hands, and my equity, all of it, had vested. $3,147,000 minus taxes. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. The horizon I'd built was gone, not because of the acquisition companies get acquired, but because of what the fight had revealed. The culture I'd tried to preserve had rotted from the inside. The mission had become just another exit strategy. Money doesn't fix that kind of damage. The aftermath played out over the following weeks. TitanMed's integration team descended. Reginald stayed on as a senior advisor for 6 months, but everyone knew he was a figurehead now. I left the day after closing. Technically, I could have stayed. But sitting in meetings with Reginald, pretending the past weeks hadn't happened, was more than I could stomach. Some battles you win by leaving the battlefield. Elizabeth called me 3 weeks after closing. You should know, Reginald is quietly being pushed out. TitanMed discovered irregularities in how he'd been reporting customer retention numbers. Nothing criminal probably, but enough to justify ending his advisory contract early. Karma? Math. People who cut corners in one area usually cut them in others. It was only a matter of time. 6 months later, I was in my father's hardware store in Cedar Rapids, helping reorganize seasonal inventory. Mindless work that lets your thoughts wander. He'd been watching me for about an hour before he spoke. You going to tell me what happened, or do I have to guess? I gave him the short version. The acquisition, the termination, the bylaw, the fight. He listened without interrupting, like whatever I had to say was the most important thing in the world. When I finished, he was quiet. Then, did you get what you were owed? Yes. Did you do it honestly? Yes. Then what's eating you? That was the question. I'd won. I had the money, the vindication, the proof that standing up for yourself works. So why did it feel like losing? I thought building something meaningful would matter more than this. I thought if you created value, treated people well, focused on the mission instead of the exit, somehow that would protect you from people like Reginald. My father picked up a rake, examined it, set it back on the shelf. You know what I learned running this store for 40 years? Good people and bad people exist at every level. Being small didn't protect me from vendors who lied, customers who stole, competitors who undercut me. And being good didn't guarantee success. Then what's the point? The point is what you do when you meet those people. You had something Reginald wanted and he tried to take it through manipulation. You could have rolled over, you didn't. That matters. My mother joined us for dinner that night. She'd made pot roast, the same recipe from my childhood, and we ate at the kitchen table where I'd done homework and built science fair projects. Your father told me about your situation. That CEO sounds like several parents I've dealt with over the years. Parents? The ones who think their child's bad grade is my failure, not their child's failure to study. Who want special treatment, exceptions to rules. They're always shocked when I say no. You say no to parents? All the time, because the moment I make an exception for one student, I'm being unfair to all the others. It's the same thing your CEO did, Nash. He wanted an exception, the right to fire you and keep your equity. He was shocked when you said no. It was such a simple framing and so accurate. Reginald had been operating in a world where rules bent for people like him, where charisma and connections mattered more than contracts, where founders were supposed to be grateful for whatever crumbs fell from the table. I'd reminded him that rules apply to everyone, even CEOs in $15,000 suits. So what's next? My father asked. You sitting on a pile of money now. You could retire, travel, take time to figure out what you want. Could I? The money was real, sitting in my bank account like a dare. I could walk away from technology, from startups, from the entire ecosystem that had nearly chewed me up and spit me out. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. The problems that had driven me to create Horizon hadn't gone away. Healthcare still needed better data analytics. The mission was still there, even if the company I'd built wasn't mine anymore. I think I'm going to start over, new company, same space, but this time I'm doing it differently. What would you change? My mother asked. Everything, the equity structure, the governance, the way we scale. I'd make sure every person who joins early has real ownership, not just options that can be manipulated. I'd build in protections not just for founders, but for everyone who takes the risk. My father smiled. Sounds like you learned something after all. Expensive lesson. The best ones usually are. I stayed in Cedar Rapids for 2 weeks, long enough to remember what it felt like to exist outside the startup pressure cooker. Long enough to question whether I really wanted to dive back into the chaos. But the pull was still there. The need to build, to solve, to create something that mattered. So I started making calls, not to venture capitalists or lawyers. To the engineers and product managers who'd left Horizon after Reginald took over. People who'd believed in the original mission and been disappointed when the culture changed. One by one, conversations happened. And slowly, carefully, a new team began to form. Stephanie Joe, who'd been our lead data scientist before leaving for a research lab. I've missed building something with commercial impact. But only if we're doing it right this time. James Alderman, a product manager who'd quit in protest when Reginald eliminated the junior mentorship program. I'm in, but I want equity terms that make sense. No more golden handcuff nonsense. Catherine West, a designer who'd freelanced for us early on. Do you have funding yet? Because I know some angels who have been burned by the same CEO behavior you dealt with. They might be interested in backing something built on better principles. 3 months after the Horizon acquisition closed, I filed incorporation papers for a new company. We called it Cornerstone Health Analytics. The name was deliberate, a foundation you could build on, something solid and reliable. The equity structure was radically different. Every employee from day one got real equity with a vesting schedule that couldn't be manipulated. The bylaws included protections not just for founders, but for any key personnel who helped build value. And we built in a provision that no employee could be terminated within 60 days of any major liquidity event without full vesting. Elizabeth Hawthorne reviewed every page. You're making it very hard for yourself to do the kind of hardball negotiating that VCs love. Good. I don't want to do business with people who see employees as expendable. The first year of Cornerstone was everything a startup should be and rarely is. Hard, yes, exhausting, absolutely, but also purposeful, honest. Built on a foundation that doesn't crumble the first time someone applies pressure, we were deliberate about every hire. Not just can this person do the job, but does this person share our values? It meant growing slower than we could have. Passing on impressive resumes that threw up cultural red flags. Having difficult conversations about whether we were being too idealistic, but it also meant building something different. The team actually enjoyed Monday mornings. People took vacations without guilt. When someone's parent got sick or their kid had a crisis, we adjusted schedules instead of suggesting they prioritize their commitment. Revolutionary? No, it was how work should be. The fact that it felt revolutionary said more about the industry than us. We built our first product in 8 months. A predictive analytics platform for emergency departments that could forecast patient volume with 93% accuracy. Our first client was a mid-sized hospital in Portland that had used Horizon's product before the TitanMed acquisition. They'd hated the integration, the new corporate interface, dealing with TitanMed's bureaucratic support. When we heard Nash Brennan was building something new, their CTO told me, we started watching. Your reputation for actually caring about the work precedes you. We closed that deal on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, I got an email from an address I hadn't seen in over a year. Reginald Fairchild. Subject line, congratulations on the new venture. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. The email was brief. Nash heard about Cornerstone through the industry grapevine. Impressive how quickly you've gotten traction. I'll be direct. I'm advising several healthcare technology companies in a strategic capacity. If you're open to it, I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I think we could benefit from each other's networks. Reginald, I read it 3 times, more astounded each time, collaboration opportunities. After everything that had happened, after he'd tried to steal $3 million from me, after the near destruction of a $400 million acquisition, he wanted to collaborate. The audacity was almost impressive. I showed the email to Elizabeth during our quarterly legal review. She laughed, an actual laugh I'd never heard from her before. Men like Reginald have very short memories when it comes to their own behavior. He's probably convinced himself that what happened with Horizon was just business, nothing personal. Now he sees you building something successful again and he wants proximity to it. What would you do? Delete the email and never think about it again. But that's me, you're the one who has to decide what kind of person you want to be. It was a false dichotomy. Not responding to Reginald wasn't holding a grudge, it was having boundaries. It was recognizing that some people don't deserve second chances, not because of revenge but because of self-preservation. I typed, Reginald, I appreciate you reaching out. After careful consideration, I don't see a productive path forward for collaboration between us. I wish you well in your advisory work. Nash, professional, courteous, absolutely final. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Reginald, voicemail. He called again. Voicemail, then a text. Nash, I think you misunderstood my email. Can we talk? No, we couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. Cornerstone grew. Not at the explosive, venture capital-fueled pace that Horizon had achieved, but steadily, sustainably. By the end of year 2, we had 18 employees, 12 active clients, and revenue that actually covered our expenses, a rarity in the startup world, where burning through investor money is worn as a badge of honor. We raised a Series A round, but on our terms. We found investors who understood that growth without values was just expansion, meaningless and hollow. The lead investor was a woman named Olivia Westbrook who'd built and sold 3 companies over a 30-year career, someone who'd seen every trick in the playbook and had the scars to prove it. I like what you're building here, she told me during our first meeting. Not just the technology, though that's solid, but the culture, the governance, the recognition that people are assets, not resources. Is that unusual? Vanishingly rare. Most founders talk about culture in pitch decks and then abandon it the moment things get difficult. You've actually built systems to protect it. That tells me you've learned something most people never figure out. We closed the Series A at $7 million. But we'd structured it carefully. No liquidation preferences that would screw employees in an exit. No board composition that could lead to founder removal. No acceleration clauses that would incentivize quick flips over sustainable building. Elizabeth had reviewed every clause, every provision, every potential trap. This is the most founder and employee-friendly term sheet I've ever seen get funded. Don't screw it up. I didn't plan to. The call came on a Thursday in April, 3 years after I'd walked out of Horizon for the last time. Andrew Holloway, the board member who'd negotiated my reinstatement, wanted to meet for coffee. We met at the same Cambridge coffee shop where Elizabeth and I had planned my response to Reginald's termination. Full circle, in a way that felt either poetic or ominous. Andrew looked older. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. I'll get right to it. The TitanMed acquisition was a disaster. They stripped Horizon for parts, killed half the product lines, and drove away most key employees. The technology you built is essentially dead, absorbed into TitanMed's existing platform and made generic. I'd heard rumors, but hearing it confirmed still stung. 6 years of work erased for corporate efficiency. I'm sorry. I know you believed in what we were building. I believed in what you were building, Andrew corrected. Reginald was building an exit. I should have seen that sooner. He paused, stirring his coffee. I'm here because several of us from the old Horizon board want to invest in Cornerstone. We made mistakes with Horizon. We'd like a chance to get it right. It was the last thing I'd expected. Andrew, we just closed our Series A 3 months ago. We're well funded for the next 18 months. Then we'll wait for your Series B. Nash, I'm not just offering money. I'm offering experience, connections, and institutional knowledge about mistakes to avoid. I learned a lot from the Horizon implosion, most of it painful. Let me put that education to use. I studied him. This wasn't a power play. This was something rarer in the venture world, genuine contrition. I need to discuss it with my team. We make major decisions collectively now, Andrew smiled. Of course you do. That's why we want in. The Cornerstone team met that Friday, all 18 of us crammed into our conference room. This was how we operated. Major decisions were transparent, discussed, debated. We talked for 2 hours. At the end, we voted. 16 in favor, 2 abstentions, 0 against. We'd bring Andrew in as an advisor now, with the understanding that he'd likely invest in our Series B. I called him that evening. The team's on board. Welcome to Cornerstone. Thank you for the second chance. Second chances, that was the theme that kept emerging, not for people who'd never learned from their mistakes like Reginald, but for people who'd been part of broken systems and wanted to build better ones. That's what Cornerstone really was, not just a company, but a second chance to do things right. To prove that you could build something valuable without sacrificing the people who helped you build it. To demonstrate that empathy wasn't weakness, it was strategy. 3 years after Reginald Fairchild tried to steal my equity, I was running a company built on the lessons that experience had taught me. We weren't the biggest or fastest growing or most buzzworthy startup in healthcare technology, but we were sustainable, ethical, real. And that was worth more than any acquisition could ever be. The corporate world likes to pretend it operates on meritocracy and fair dealing. The reality is messier. There are Reginalds in every industry, people who see relationships as transactions and loyalty as leverage. There are boards that prioritize short-term returns over long-term sustainability. There are systems designed to benefit those who know how to manipulate them. But there are also Elizabeth Hawthorns who build protections into contracts, Andrews who learn from their mistakes, teams willing to grow slowly if it means growing right, and founders who refuse to accept that cruelty is the price of success. Bylaw 4E saved my equity, yes. But more than that, it taught me something essential. The rules matter, but only if you're willing to enforce them. Empathy matters, but only if it's paired with boundaries. Trust matters, but only when it's earned and reciprocated. Reginald thought he could erase me with a termination letter. Instead, he taught me exactly how resilient I could be. In trying to steal my equity, he gave me something far more valuable. The knowledge that I could stand up for myself and win. That lesson was worth every difficult moment, every tense negotiation, every hour spent reading bylaws and preparing for the possibility that everything might fall apart. You don't get to choose whether you'll face corporate betrayal, but you do get to choose how you respond. You can accept it as inevitable, part of the cost of doing business. Or you can fight back, armed with whatever tools you have available, bylaws, lawyers, principles, and the absolute certainty that you deserve better. I chose to fight. And in fighting, I discovered who I actually was. Not just a founder or a technologist, but someone who refused to let the Reginalds of the world define the rules. If you found value in this story, if you've recognized these struggles or seen the systems that tried to break me, there's a growing community here at the Corporate Vault. We're building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, people who understand that these stories matter, that the truth about corporate America needs to be told without polish or pretense. Your subscription isn't just support. It's a statement that you're paying attention, that you refuse to look away. The boardrooms and corner offices, the bylaws and equity agreements, the betrayals and the battles back, these are the real stories of corporate America. These are the lessons they don't teach in business school. These are the truths that only emerge when someone is willing to stand up and say, "This happened to me and this is how I survived." Welcome to the Corporate Vault. These stories are just beginning.